In this video, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the events that we can build into our actual Excel file. And what I mean by this is we can set up events to run a macro when something specific happens on our Excel file. And one of the most common applications of this is double-clicking on a cell to open up a user form that has this row of information in it, or double-clicking on a different cell to automatically run some calculations on this row of information or in this column of information. And so double click is one of the most common events that you'll use. There are different events that you can execute, and it's pretty easy to find that list. So for our example, we're going to be building a double click event. So the first thing we'll do is go to our developer tab and open up our Visual Basic window. Now you can see over here on the left, I am using an Excel file that we built previously. This is the Excel file we built a custom function in, which is what these three columns over here are for. And this is also the Excel file that we built a form in to add new employees to this table. So in this case, we might want to be able to double click on this first name, open up all of this information as a user form, and we might want to be able to make some edits to that information and resave it. And this can be done pretty easily. We already have the form built, so we could copy and paste this form and just restructure it to be saving instead of adding new data. But for our purposes, we're going to use a very simple example based on that same concept so that we don't have to build a new form, but you can see how you would actually execute this. So you'll notice we have some Microsoft Excel objects up in the top of our Project Explorer window. We can see we have Sheet 1 and we have this workbook. Now if we right click on either of these, you can view the code that's associated with those objects. So in our case, we're interested in writing code directly onto Sheet 1, and we'll see this in a minute. So we'll click View Code, and we'll open up the code window for Sheet 1. Now, as I mentioned before, we can see the full list of actions we can take to set up events by selecting Worksheet. And this means we're going to apply whatever subroutine we write to this specific worksheet. So this will only execute on our Sheet 1 worksheet. If we add in sheets later, this code will not relate to those sheets. Now we can come over here into this actions list and click on the drop down, and we can see there's a whole lot of different actions that we can take to create events. In our purposes, and this is probably the most common, we are going to select before double click. And I'm going to go ahead and delete this private sub that was created automatically. And we're just going to look at this before double click subroutine. Now you can see we have target as range and cancel as boolean that are automatically created as inputs. And we can use these, or we can write our own criteria for when we want this double click to actually run. And so we're going to take the latter of those two options. So we're going to say we're going to create a variable C, which is going to be an integer, and a variable R, which is going to be an integer. Now C is going to be the column that we double clicked on. So we're going to say for the active cell, which is the cell that we just double clicked, I want you to pull the column number. And that will become our C value. We're also going to say for the active cell, the row will become our variable R. Now just as a quick example of what this means, we could say really quick, if C equals 6, then we want to get a message box that says column 6. Else we want to get a message box that says wrong column. And don't forget to put the end if at the bottom. I'll go ahead and save this and go back to my main Excel file. And now if we test this out, if I double click on any other column than 6, which is column F, so if I go over here and I double click in column D, I get a message box that says I've clicked the wrong column. If I double click in column 6, which is column F, now I see I get the column 6 message. So we know that our column number is reading correctly according to what we're double clicking. So I'll come back into my VBA window. I'll click out of this cell, and then I'll come back into my VBA window. And the reason that we have to click out of that cell is because VBA doesn't want you to write code while you have your cursor actively inside one of the cells on your Excel worksheet. So that's something to keep in mind. Always click out of a cell, deactivate that cell before you continue to write your code. So this time I'm going to use a not statement, and we'll see why in a second. I'll go ahead and create my end if so that we don't forget it later. So what this statement reads is, this is the criteria that I'm checking, everything between the if and the then. In this case, I want to know if we clicked on something that wasn't in column 6. I only want to run this code if I click on the first name column. That's what I've decided, so I've put not C equals 6. So everything that's in the parentheses here gets checked against the negative. And that means if I click on anything other than what's in this column, which is column 6, then this is going to run. So we're going to say if we click on anything other than column 6, we just want to exit the sub. We don't want anything else to happen. We didn't click on the first name column, so I'm not interested in running any sort of code. Now, if we pass this criteria, which means if this checks and we did click on column 6, we're going to jump past this little if statement, and instead we're going to create some variables. So we'll create a first variable for our first name, a last variable for our last name, a start variable for the start date, a role variable for the role, and a full-time variable for our full-time. Now this is where normally if you had a form or something that you wanted to open up, you could pre-fill that form with these values, and then you could write that form to save information that's adjusted instead of adding new information. But that would take us a minute to do. We already have the tools to do that based off of the form instructions videos. So instead we're just going to pull these values. So we'll pull our first name value out of whatever row we clicked on, and we know that's in column 6. Our last name value is in whatever row we clicked on, column 7. Our start date value is in whatever row we clicked on, column 8. The role value is in whatever row we clicked on, column 9. And last but not least, the full-time value is in whatever row we clicked on, column 10. And instead of opening a new form and going through all of that, we're just going to create a couple quick message boxes just to see if this is working. So we'll say you selected, and we'll go ahead and say our first name. We'll give ourselves a space in between, and then the last name. So we should get a message box that pops up and tells us what name we've selected. And then we'll also create a message box that says they started on, and we'll say the start date, and combine that with as our full-time variable, so whether they're full-time or part-time, employee in, and we'll say role. So all in all, this should read, you selected your employee's name here, and then they started on this date as a full-time or part-time employee in whatever their role was, so design, management, whatever we selected. So we're going to test this out. We'll click save. We'll minimize this. And now I'm going to double click intentionally on something that's not in column 6. So I'm going to come over here and I'll double click on column J. And we can see nothing happens. My cursor just enters the cell, nothing special happens. None of these columns are column 6. So we know our if statement is working properly. Now I'm going to come over here and I am going to click in column 6. I'm just going to double click on one of these names. So I'll double click on John's name here. And we can see I've gotten this message box that says you selected John Smith. I'll click OK. They started on 1/1/20 as a full-time employee in design. So we know that our message boxes are working, we know that our if statement is working, and we know that we've successfully pulled the data out of this particular row that we double-clicked on. And this will work for any of these rows that we double-click on that have data in them. So we know that our code is working properly. So this is what building an event does in Excel. And you can tie these events directly to worksheets or to a specific workbook, which can be very helpful, and it can get information out of an entire row or out of an entire column pretty quickly and into your VBA for you to work with in your code directly. So in this video, we learned about building custom events. We learned about a couple of the different kinds of events, but primarily the before double-click event, which is the most common usage of this. And we learned how to actually go through and pull the active column, the active row, and then execute some code with that information.